Greetings, Boogie fans! Michael here, and in the Pokemon games, there are some moves that just aren't very good. Why use Water Gun when Scald is stronger and can burn? Why use Thunder Shock when you can use Thunderbolt? The same thing, but stronger. Now, of course, these weaker moves are important for the earlier parts of a playthrough to balance the game, but for post-game or competitive play, they're not very useful. But they're not completely useless. They still do damage, just less damage than their better alternatives. However, there are some situations out there where a Pokemon can learn a move that for it specifically, the move is completely useless. It either does nothing, always fails, or does something redundant. Today I'm going to be listing 10 instances of a Pokemon being able to learn a move that is useless for it specifically. However, I should specify up front that I'm going to be ignoring uncommon situations, mainly typings or abilities being changed or suppressed. Most of the moves that I'm going to be talking about are useless because they clash with the Pokemon's ability or typing. So therefore, if that ability or type goes away, then the move is no longer useless. However, that only occurs in uncommon battle situations, and it would be kind of annoying to specify that every single entry, so just assume that all of these entries have to do with regular battle situations without any attributes of a Pokemon being changed. On the topic of battles, this video is sponsored by Hustle Castle, which is so close to a perfect rhyme, but I suppose Hassle Castle wouldn't sound very fun. Hustle Castle is a mobile game that I've been having a ton of fun with, and I'm gonna tell you guys about it because I think you'll like it too. In the game, you control your very own castle, which you can customize and expand upon as you progress with all kinds of rooms. You obtain castle dwellers, which you can assign to any room and role that you want, like treasurers or chefs or soldiers. The soldiers are my favorite because you can customize their outfits and weapons for various classes like tank, archer, or mage, and then take them out into battle, either progressing through the story levels by fighting all kinds of fun monsters, or against other players by attacking their castles. And you can play with me by joining my clan. Find it under the name MandJTV and join it to team up with me. Download Hustle Castle using the link in the description below, enter your nickname, and get a special bonus for new players, 250 diamonds and 3,500 gold pieces. Thanks again to Hustle Castle for sponsoring, but now let's start with the first entry on our list, the first useless move situation, that being number 1, floating Pokemon with Magnet Rise. Magnet Rise is an electric type move introduced in Generation 4. For 5 turns after using it, the user acts like it has the ability Levitate. It's immune to ground moves, will not be impacted by spikes or toxic spikes, will not be affected by terrains, etc. It's not the best move out there, but it's situationally helpful for Pokemon that are weak to ground moves, like electric or steel types. Now you might be thinking that they would only give a move like this to Pokemon that have not already Magnet Risen, but nope. There are several floating Pokemon out there that can learn Magnet Rise. Dynamo, Electric, Eelektross, and Vikavolt can all learn Magnet Rise, but have the ability Levitate, so they're already floating. Minior and Celesteela can also learn it, but are flying type Pokemon, so they too are already immune to ground moves. Of course, there are many situations where these Pokemon could stop floating, like they lose Levitate or gravity is in effect or they're hit by Smackdown, but as I said in the intro, I'm not going to be focusing on uncommon situations. The vast majority of the time, these Pokemon using Magnet Rise would be a complete waste of a turn. Next is a move that isn't very good normally, but it's completely useless on one particular Pokemon. That being number 2, Umbreon with Synchronoise. Synchronoise is a psychic type move introduced in Generation 5. It hits all adjacent Pokemon like Discharge does, and it is base 120 power and 100% accurate. While that seems amazing, there's a catch. Synchronoise will only damage Pokemon that share at least one type with the user. So if Noctowl uses it, it only hurts normal and flying type Pokemon. If Chimecho uses it, it can only hurt Psychic-type Pokemon. It's far too situational of a move to ever be good, but it's completely useless on Umbreon specifically. Eevee can get Synchronoise as an egg move, and then of course can be evolved into all the evolutions, one of which is Umbreon. But Umbreon is a dark type, which means that its Synchronoise can only hurt other dark type Pokemon. However, Synchronoise is a psychic type attack, and therefore dark type Pokemon are immune to it. Therefore, without any ring target shenanigans, Umbreon can never damage another Pokemon using Synchronoise. The move is completely useless on it. The next entry also deals with the dark type, but instead of a dark type Pokemon, it's a dark type move. That being number 3, Klutz Pokémon with Fling. Fling is a dark type damaging move introduced in Generation 4 that involves the user throwing their held item at the opponent. The power and secondary effect of the move depends on the item that is flung, and the move can't be used again unless the Pokemon gains another item. As for Klutz, it's an ability that removes all the effects of the Pokemon's held item. They can still hold items, but they don't get the effects of one, whether the effects are positive or negative. It's honestly a pretty trash ability because held items are a really big part of competitive Pokemon play, and you just don't get to use one. However, there was a strategy back in Gen 4 where a Klutz Pokemon could hold a negative item like a Toxic Orb and then fling it onto the enemy Pokemon, so they can hold the item without being hurt by it and then inflict the enemy Pokemon with the effects of that item. But then Generation 5 implemented a change. Klutz Pokémon can no longer use Fling. If they try to use Fling and they have the ability Klutz, the move will fail every single time. There are 7 Pokemon that can both have the ability Klutz and learn Fling. Baniri, Lopunny, Audino, Golett, Golurk, Stuffle, and Beware. While these Pokemon do have other abilities and could use Fling if they don't have Klutz, if you get one that does have Klutz, Fling is completely useless on them. Either don't teach it Fling or use an ability capsule on it, if possible. The next entry is number 4, non-sleepers with Rest. You likely know what Rest does, but in case you don't, it causes the user to fully regain their HP, then go to sleep for 2 turns, whether they had a non-volatile status condition or not. It's been around since Generation 1, and the vast majority of Pokemon can learn it. But even though it's a widespread move, there are several Pokemon that can't make use of it. Pokemon with abilities that prevent them from falling asleep. Those abilities being Insomnia, Vital Spirit, and Sweet Veil. If a Pokemon with one of these 3 abilities tries to use Rest, the move will fail every time. I'm not gonna list all of the Pokemon that this applies to because it's all of them. Every single Pokemon that can have Insomnia, Vital Spirit, or Sweet Veil can also learn Rest. Now, of course, these Pokemon have other abilities, so Rest is useful on them if they don't have one of their non-sleeping abilities. But if they do, don't teach it Rest. The move is a complete waste. Next is another situation involving Rest, but for a different reason. That being number 5, Shedinja with Rest. Now, Shedinja doesn't have Vital Spirit, Insomnia, or Sweet Veil. It can fall asleep. However, Rest can fail for 2 reasons. The first is if the Pokemon can't fall asleep, but the other is if the Pokemon's HP is full. Shedinja is a weird Pokemon due to its ability. Wonder Guard prevents all direct attack damage to it unless the move is super effective. To compensate for that OP ability, Shedinja's base HP stat is 1. Literally 1. The max HP a Shedinja can have, even at level 100, is 1. Therefore, Rest will always fail if a Shedinja tries to use it. Because since Shedinja only has 1 HP, it's either at full HP or it's dead. There's no in-between, and an in-between value is necessary for Rest to work. The move will always fail if a Shedinja tries to use it. Side note, an honorable mention useless move for Shedinja is Final Gambit. This move causes the user to faint, but does damage to the target equal to the HP that the user lost by fainting. So since Shedinja only has 1 HP, Final Gambit will only ever do 1 HP point of damage if a Shedinja uses it. Not technically useless, but so close to useless that I figured I should mention it. Alright, so that's 2 entries having to do with rest, so let's stay on theme and have another entry not about rest specifically, but about just being generally lazy. That being number 6, Truant Pokemon with 2-turn moves. You likely know what Truant does. It's a hindering ability that only allows the Pokemon to move every other turn, with the Pokemon loafing around on the off turns. The ability sucks and is only useful if you are inflicting an enemy Pokemon with it, like by using entrainment. But what you may not have realized about Truant Pokemon is that they can't use 2-turn moves. On one of their good turns, they can initiate the charging turn of the move, but then on the second turn, they're loafing around. The move never gets to finish, and therefore the charging of it is reset. The moves simply don't work. Of the 3 Truant Pokemon, each can learn 1 2-turn move that will consistently fail. Slackoth and Slacking get Solar Beam, and Durant gets Dig. Now, of course, there are ways to get around this. If Truant goes away, then they're fine, and a Power Herb allows them to use the 2-turn charging move in just 1 turn, 1 time. So it allows them to use Solar Beam or Dig once. Also, if the sunlight is harsh, then Slackoth and Slacking can fire Solar Beams off in just 1 turn, every other turn when they're not loafing around. But there's no way to speed up and make a Dig take only 1 turn other than a Power Herb. So if it's not holding a Power Herb, a Truant Durant can never use Dig. Thankfully, this situation isn't really a problem. Slacking is a physical attacker, so it's not gonna wanna use Solar Beam anyways, and Durant has non-Truant abilities that you are going to pick every time unless you're doing the Truant entrainment strategy. But still, technically, if the Pokemon has Truant, the 2-turn moves are useless. Next is number 7, Shadow Tag Pokemon with Mean Look. Shadow Tag is an ability that prevents enemy Pokemon from fleeing wild battles or switching out in trainer battles. Mean Look is a move that creates that same effect on the target Pokemon. Prior to Gen 6, both of these worked on all Pokemon, but since Gen 6, they work on all Pokemon except Ghost types. Therefore, it doesn't make sense for a Shadow Tag Pokemon to know Mean Look. It's a redundant situation like with Magnet Rise and Levitate. The move is doing something that the ability is already doing, trapping the enemy Pokemon. There are only 6 Pokemon that get Shadow Tag, and 4 of them can learn Mean Look: Mega Gengar, Gothita, Gothorita, and Gothitelle. Mean Look can be useful on Gengar if you're not Mega Evolving it, but if you have a Shadow Tag Gothita, Gothorita, or Gothitelle, Mean Look makes no sense on it. Next is number 8, Weather Changing moves on Primal Groudon, Primal Kyogre, and Mega Rayquaza. This one, it's gonna need a little bit of explaining. Now you may be thinking that a weather-changing move is useless on regular Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza. For Groudon or Kyogre, why would you teach it Sunny Day or Rain Dance when their abilities summon that weather automatically? For Rayquaza, why would you teach it a weather-changing move when Airlock prevents all effects of that weather? I will agree, the moves don't make a whole lot of sense on the regular forms of these Pokemon, but they still technically have a use. For example, you send your Groudon into battle, Drought summons the sun, but then another Pokemon uses a weather-changing move and gets rid of the sun. If your Groudon knows Sunny Day, it can set the sun back up without having to switch out. As for Rayquaza, Airlock doesn't remove the weather, it removes the effects of it. So, Rayquaza could summon the weather and then switch out. Therefore, the effects of the weather suddenly come back and therefore impact the enemy Pokemon and whatever Pokemon you send in. So you could have Rayquaza use Hail and then switch out and then suddenly the enemy Pokemon takes some hail damage. Like I said, super situational, extremely specific, probably not a battle situation you're ever going to encounter, and therefore, maybe don't teach your Groudon Sunny Day. But with Gen 6, things changed because these Pokemon got super forms. I'm saying super forms to encapsulate both Primal and Mega. And therefore, these super forms can summon super weathers. And these super weathers can only be changed by other super weathers. Regular weather summoning moves or abilities, so Sunny Day, Rain Dance, Hail, Sandstorm, Sandstream, Snow Warning, for the Drought, and Drizzle, they don't work if a super weather is on the field. They will fail every time. The only way to get rid of a super weather is if the Pokemon controlling the weather switches out, or another super weather activating Pokemon enters the field while the other one's weather was already up. So a Primal Groudon Super Sun can only go away if the Groudon switches out, or a Primal Kyogre or Mega Rayquaza enters the battle and therefore replaces Groudon's Super Sun. Therefore, the scenarios I mentioned earlier, they no longer work. If a Primal Groudon has its sunlight set up, and then a Primal Kyogre or Mega Rayquaza enters the field and gets rid of the Super Sun, the only way the Primal Groudon can set its sun back up is switching out and switching back in. If it knows Sunny Day just won't do anything. In short, super weathers can only be changed by other super weathers. Therefore, these three Pokemon, if they're on the field, there is some kind of super weather on the field, whether it's theirs or another one that replaced theirs. So, if they know a regular weather summoning move, the move is always gonna fail. They're completely useless on the super forms of these Pokemon. Now for the next entry, and all of the situations I've discussed so far have been ones where the move could be made useful if the Pokemon's typing or ability changed. However, these last two are always useless because the attributes that clash with the move cannot be changed. The first of these two is number 9, Ash-Greninja with Roleplay. Roleplay is a Psychic type move introduced in Generation 3. It's a pretty straightforward move. It simply causes the user to copy the ability of the target. However, Roleplay doesn't work on abilities that are integral to how the Pokemon works. For example, Disguise on Mimikyu or Stance Change on Aegislash. These abilities don't work on other Pokemon, so therefore other Pokemon cannot take or copy or suppress these abilities, and the Pokemon that have these abilities can't have their abilities changed. That second part is another limitation of Roleplay. Roleplay cannot copy these special abilities, but if the user has one of these abilities, they can't lose it. Roleplay will always fail if the user has an ability that cannot be changed. There's only one Pokemon that's in this situation, a Greninja with Battle Bond. An Ash-Greninja, so a Greninja with the ability Battle Bond, cannot lose that ability under any circumstances. It can't be skill swapped, it can't be suppressed, and it can't be changed by using Roleplay. Therefore, a Greninja with the ability Battle Bond can learn Roleplay, but if it tries to use the move, it will always fail. Roleplay is completely useless on an Ash-Greninja. And the final entry is a move made useless not due to the Pokemon's type or ability, but due to another attribute of the Pokemon. That being number 10, Genderless Pokemon with Attract. You know how Attract works. If the target is of the opposite gender of the user, they are inflicted with the Infatuation status condition, causing them to only be able to move half of the time until either them or the Pokemon they've fallen for leaves the battlefield. Attract fails against Pokemon of the same gender and against genderless Pokemon, but it also fails if the user is genderless, since there's no opposite gender of genderless Pokemon. Now, most genderless Pokemon cannot learn Attract for this very reason, but there are a few exceptions of genderless Pokemon that can never use Attract. Oh, that sounded kind of sad. Those Pokemon are Mew, Cryogonal, Minior, and Dhelmise. Staryu and Starmie could also learn Attract in only Gen 2, but not since then. So the only way to get one now is to teach it one in the Gen 2 Virtual Console and then transfer it. I feel kind of bad for these Pokemon. Most genderless Pokemon don't care about falling in love, but these clearly have the ability to, and they never can. That's so sad. Pour one out for the genderless attract Pokemon. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to download Hustle Castle using the link in the description below. It's a super fun game that I know you will enjoy, and thanks again to them for sponsoring. Also, thank you to my patrons who are supporting me in a way independent of fluctuating YouTube ad revenue. If you want to check out some more of my fun Pokemon content, I recommend these things here, and you should click one of these things to subscribe. All right, that's all I have for now, so till next time, Poké fans. Gotta catch them all.